What is up, guys? Welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. Today I want to talk to you about creating fawning cover. So it's the beginning of May, and I would expect to start seeing those fawns show up on trail cameras in about a month. That's when I typically start seeing them here in southeastern Wisconsin. Now, we might be a little late to the game in creating ideal fawning cover for this year, but there are some things that you can still do right now which will help increase stem count, and that is what fawns need. The more stems, the better. Now, there's two places that you may want to create fawning cover, and one would be in the woods and the other would be in a field, and you can do it in both. So it doesn't really matter what kind of habitat you currently have naturally on your property. Both of these situations are ideal for turning them into perfect fawning habitat. So what do we do if we're in the woods? Well, the number one thing you really need to do is get as much sunlight down to the forest floor as possible. Now, if you guys have been hanging out in this community and learning all there is to learn about habitat improvement for deer, you probably already know that sunlight is your best friend in a woods situation. And so, of course, there's going to be a lot of chainsaw work in order to get some of those big mature trees down and allow for the sunlight to get down to the ground. Now, when you do that, of course, every little thing that's down on the forest floor now has a chance to get some sunlight and starts to grow. And those things are what are going to create that ideal fawning habitat, all of those stems close to the ground. So the other thing is if you have aspens. Aspens are an awesome habitat improvement tree. Not when they're mature. If you have mature aspens, the best thing to do is just cut them off, flush with the ground, let them die, haul them out for firewood or whatever else you want to do with them. But what happens is that adult tree will shoot up all of these shoots around it, hundreds of them per tree, and you will be left with a thick cover of stems near the ground that is good for browse and is good for cover. And although these things are awesome for fawning cover, these things are also good for deer cover in general. So these are really good things to do on your property, not just for your fawns, but for your deer herd altogether. So the last thing I want to put on here for the woods is hinge cutting. Now, hinge cutting's not always required, but in a big woods setting, it can be very useful. So if you do have hinge cuttable trees, that they aren't too big and they aren't the wrong species that are going to snap when you try to hinge cut them, then yeah, you could hinge cut them instead of just cutting them off flush to try to get that sunlight to the forest floor, because that hinge cut tree will start growing shoots and new branches up towards the sun a lot faster than the things on the ground that you're waiting to take off now that they finally have some sunlight. So those are three ways that you're going to create fawning cover and cover in general for your deer herd in the woods. If you guys feel like you're getting some value from this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so this community can continue to grow. So now, if we're going to put fawning cover in a field, what we're trying to get here are our forbs and our broadleaves, things like goldenrod and ragweed to grow in the field instead of more of the grasses that are thick and create that mat close to the ground, but they don't actually grow tall enough for cover for deer and fawns. So it's actually pretty easy to do that. And so how we do that is we can disc or cultivate the ground when the grasses are dormant. So that would be before spring green up. And I know in many parts of the country we've hit spring green up already. There's still a few parts in the northern part of the country that probably haven't hit spring green up yet. So you could get out there and work that land real quick. And if you do that, you're going to get those forbs and those broadleaves to grow instead of your grasses. Now, you cannot do this once everything starts growing. So some of you may have noticed that if you cultivate or even if you spray, that what grows back is typically grasses. You're usually going to do a really good job at killing those forbs and broadleaves with that first spraying or that first time of turning the dirt, but those grasses just obnoxiously keep coming back. Well, when you're trying to create fawning cover, that's not what you want to do, because those grasses are just not thick enough at a high enough level to create cover for the deer. So you need to work your ground or spray in the dormant season. Or with spraying, obviously if you spray dormant plants, that's not going to kill them. So what you're going to want to do is spray right before the dormant season. So if you spray in late fall, right as everything's starting to die off, you're going to kill all of those grasses before they have a chance to go dormant and then come back in the spring. And that's when all of your forbs and your broadleaves are going to pop up in the spring instead of those grasses. Same thing with cultivating or disking in the dormant season. You will get your broadleaves to come up in the growing season. But if you spray or cultivate during the growing season, you get grasses to come up. So just keep that in mind, that you always want to work a field that you're trying to get broadleaves up during the dormant season in order to get broadleaves. And if you work it during the growing season, you are going to get grasses. Now, I know some guys love to say that deer love to eat weeds, and they do, but during the summertime. So these weeds, this goldenrod, this ragweed, etc., that you're allowing to come up to create fawning grounds and create bedding, is something that you would do if you have a lot of open fields, because you're going to have your food plots somewhere else on your property that you're trying to use to manipulate the movement of the deer for during the hunting season. But these weeds and these forbs can be planted adjacent to those food plots for bedding and cover and fawning grounds during the summer months. But those are not going to be a very attractive food source during the fall. That's why we still plant food plots, and you don't want to just plant these forbs all over your property, because that food plot source of food is still going to be more attractive during the actual hunting season, when we're trying to very specifically manipulate where the deer are moving at that time of year. So the other last thing on here is browse. Now we're talking about things like red osier dogwood's a big one, but things like small shrubs and stuff as well. They're going to provide food and cover to deer. And again, when we're talking about a fawning ground, we're talking about as much cover as close to the ground as we can get it. And so these are the things you're going to want to put if you don't have a lot of big mature trees and you're in more of an open field situation, because those does will put those fawns in those thick cover areas, and then they'll relate to your food plots once you put them in, and they probably won't move a whole lot from that area for the majority of the year. They're going to bed in the bedding area where the thick cover is, and then they're going to move on to the food plots right before dark, and then you're hoping that your bucks will be in that next layer of bedding to associate with that food source as well. So I hope you guys got some information out of this. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.